Hello, world. This is probably the hardest time in history to be a product designer. We're being asked to juggle all of these different disciplines now. We've got strategy and communication and then execution. And on top of it all, we've got all this AI fluency that we're just expected to pick up out of nowhere. On top of all that, we still need to be the translators connecting our technical and non technical teams. That's why I was so excited to talk to Sylvia Nguyen Dang, who shares her stories of being a principal product designer at the Providence Digital Innovation Group. Sylvia shared how she manages these expanding responsibilities while also collaborating deeply with the other product members of her team. So, why don't we have Sylvia take it away? Sylvia, thank you so much for joining us. I want to start getting to know you a little bit more. What's a typical day like for you as a principal product designer?
Yeah, so my day is, a lot like lots of folks who sit on like embedded teams within big like, tech companies. So I'm over at the Digital Innovation Group at Providence, which is like one of the largest health systems in the US. And so within this little group, we are a tech incubator where we're building out products for healthcare, for both the patients and for providers. So my typical day looks like where I do like daily syncs with our product design and engineering team, just to get the lay of the land, give updates. I work with our my PM very closely on product strategy and like how do we communicate our story of the product and what we're trying to do to other stakeholders and leaders. And then I'm get in there in Figma and Jira doing the day-to-day implementation work. And then also a lot of thinking ahead. Okay, what are we going to do next quarter, and how do we actually figure out what the vision is for the product further down the line? Yeah, that's kind of I would say, my weekly agenda usually is just a lot of various meetings and then mixed in with like hands-on work.
Amazing, amazing. Do you find it hard to shift gears between kind of like that strategy and communication work and then the nitty gritty like execution? We're in Figma, we're designing. How do you kind of manage that?
The nice thing about it is that the pace it feels like it goes up and down. So there are times when it's like really crazy where you're doing all things all at once, both designing, both like context switching and getting into like stakeholder meetings and everything else. I feel like it's been kind of a nice rhythm for me currently in my role where it's like, okay, I've done the majority of that discovery and design work, and now it's in developers' hands, like to get this thing launched out the door. And so I'm there with them, tinkering and maintaining it. But a lot of it now, it's like, okay, we got to shift over and figure out, work with the PM to figure out, okay, what's next? What are we going to do next to make sure that we maintain this, improve it, and also work on the next project too?
Gotcha, gotcha. I think it kind of segues well into my next question, which it feels like the list of skills product designers need to know just keeps growing and growing. We're doing communication, we're doing strategy, we're doing the Figma design. How do you kind of like sift through all the noise and identify the skills you want to work on and improve?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I feel like for me, it depends on the situation where I at with my company and the team itself, and really finding where the need is. Like for example, like within my current team setup, we found like because we're like a small org that sits independently, but within a gigantic company. So a lot of it is just like really trying to figure out how do we tell our story, right? And like how do we actually know, like let other people know like, what we're working on, why it matters, and why it's important to keep around. And so I saw this need there because a lot of like our like slide decks and everything is just like so just like walls of text, and it's just like doing the product and like the team a disservice. And so I just thought I'm not a presentation designer, but like I thought I saw a need to get in there to actually really help our PM to figure out how we actually manage tell the story from our side to like the rest of the company. And that differs because at other places I worked at, it's like, okay, we saw a need there, like they needed more project management stuff. So I jumped into that role to like really help, okay, let's get this across to like the line and figure out how we're going to market, communicate. So it really depends. And I think for me in general, is trying to stay on top of things is also I really like reading a lot of like design newsletters, following other designers, and just tinkering around and trying to figuring out like what's something new or what am I curious about learning, and just kind of going after that.
Mhm. Right on. That feels very similar to kind of my approach as well, which is it's very driven by like the work I'm doing right now and like who I'm engaging with, especially like so we're in like agency world. So it's like what's the client need right now and can we deliver on what their expectations are? Sometimes though, I feel like I'm missing like a broader thread through my like learning where I'm like, should I be looking forward a little bit more and like trying to go where the puck is going? And do you ever feel that way? And if you do, like, how do you try to overcome that with your learning?
Yeah. I mean, I know we're going to get into all this AI stuff, but it's like it's you, I feel it every day. And it's one of those things where there's a push and pull within like really like healthcare because it's so highly regulated and like really complex. And like anything you do, you have to like make sure it's airtight, like for security and responsibly managed. So we are trying to, break the mold by bringing in AI into the products and showing the value of where it could really like help improve like clinical workflows, make patients' lives easier. And we're seeing the pushback against from like, you know, legacy systems, like all like, people who have been within like the company for like ages and ages who are just like, oh, why do we need this? Like, is this something that we want to adopt? How can we do this safely? And so a lot of politics involved around that. So trying to stay ahead of it is both okay. I want to learn the skills because I know that like if we don't use AI now as designers, I'm going to get left behind. And so it's like just trying to practice on my own through side projects, and then also just trying to figure out the whole politics and messaging of that piece. Like, okay, how do we strategically like incorporate AI in a way that's like, okay, something that's both like palatable to like the rest of stakeholders and leadership, but also we prove that like the value of it. Like this is going to move not only dollars, bring in more revenue, but just also improve the overall UX of different products in the patient experience in general. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, the AI is just Pandora's box, right? There's so many different ways to take it. Um, Before we dive too far into that, though, I do want to ask, coding sort of goes hand in hand with AI, especially like in our world. And we've sort of seen that skill like ebb and flow over the years. Is like you have to be a designer who codes, or no, just focus on design. That's sort of what we need. Do you think that's still like a must-have sort of skill these days, or is it more of like a nice kind of differentiator for?
I will definitely say and admit, like I am not a coder at all. And so like in my like knowledge of it, it's like very base level. Um, but I think what's necessary is to at least be like technically literate, like just know enough to also know what you don't know, which, for me, admittedly, is a lot. So I think what that means is like for me working on a team that is like very technical. Like my PM, he has like a PhD in AI and like machine learning, and then we work with a lot of engineers who are like that's their whole world. Is like what I feel like I bring to the table is like being that voice of the non-technical person. It's like, okay, whatever you said, can you explain it to me as the non-technical person to really break it down into something that's very basic and understandable? Because then that helps me as a designer translate that to build a product for other non-technical folks who don't know the entire like AI, all that like engineering, any of that stuff. And so in that process, I ask a lot of dumb questions, and I like that I work with a collaborative team who are also very humble, that are able to kind of then break things down for me, give me examples, and like actually like explain how things work outside of like their little technical sphere. So that's helped me.
I love that. I love that, like being the translator between like the really like intense technical people and then also like the users who you're right. Like every time we're designing, they're often not nearly as technical as we are, and they need that translation layer. And if you have all the tech skills, you might be missing that. So that really resonates. Was there like a particular project or moment where you felt like you didn't have enough technical knowledge, and how did you kind of overcome that as you were dealing with that project?
Yeah, I mean, I think the current one that we're working on right now. So basically, we're building a tool for clinical workers to essentially help them find patient data in order to close care gaps, which means like in non-healthcare speak, it's like if you know that you have like a health screening, like a colorectal cancer screening or breast cancer screening, things like that, those are called care gaps, where their doctors and their care teams really want to close that care gaps for patients, because that means their patients are healthier if they get screened, they can detect cancers earlier, and overall it also means they get paid by insurance companies if they can close those care gaps. So really what we're building is like just how do we find that information and surface that to clinical workers so then they can just get their jobs done in terms of like uh, finding the right info, sending it back to the insurance, getting paid for that, and then also getting back to patient care. And in that process, it sounds so simple. And I built this kind of like pie in the sky version of this. And then once you like get to reality, you have all these roadblocks with like integrating with the various like huge health systems where the patient data comes in, using AI to extract that and making sure it's actually like readable by like humans. Um, and something as simple as like, oh, okay, when you click on this link in our product, it's going to direct you right to where you need to see it in the patient record. It seems super like simple, right? And the reality is like, no, we had to pare that one little feature down a lot because getting that to connect was actually very, very complicated. And so I had to come up with like 5 different workarounds that like maybe wasn't like the best, most optimal UX, but kind of steps that we could get there as we're learning how like the technical connections on the back end. So that's one example of just like always trying to iterate and never being able to actually implement like the true like the vision of like the dream scenario of like what I initially designed in the first place.
Yeah, I felt that pain. That's I think anytime you're working in a system that's bigger than like a startup or like an MVP, it's like we've got all these different silos and how are they going to come together? Do you have any like techniques you like to use for like visualizing the whole system and like building that mental model of all the different pieces? How do you kind of go through that process?
Yeah, and it's definitely like a co-designing process where I'm not doing it by myself because I definitely don't know everything. So I think what's worked best in my current role is getting all the folks in the room, getting us all into Fig Jam together to actually just kind of build on ideas. So that's bringing like subject matter experts. Like we're not the ones looking in the patient record; it's the clinical workers, bringing them in to actually like really understand what their workflows like, where their pain points are, bringing in PMs and engineers to actually lay out the actual like infrastructure and technical feasibility pieces, and also then also learning from like beyond our own team, like what do our company leaders care about? Like what are the metrics we want to actually like measure for this? So all that coming together into like a messy brainstorm at the beginning to figure out, okay, what do we know, what don't we know, and then how do we actually move forward like step by step from here.
Amazing. We've kind of touched on this like loosely, but I'd love to dig in a little more. Like, how is your team organized? Like, who sits on it, and like, what roles do y'all have?
Yeah, so my direct team pod is relatively small and nimble. So I'm the sole designer, and we have a product manager, and then about I want to say maybe like 6 to 8 engineers, ranging from infrastructure, front end, back end, like full stack, and like an AI ML engineer. Um, and then also we used to have a user researcher, but I've taken on that role now. So yeah, it's a small, mighty team.
Awesome. And do you have like a guild of designers you can tap into, or is it like you are the sole designer for the whole org?
We have our other we have 2 other designers, and then what's really cool, which I've never encountered this before, is that the head of our product and analytics org, so my boss's boss, she is like so our VP of design and product, and she comes from a user research background. So I found that super interesting because she's like really grounded in like human centered research and design thinking, and to see her like as kind of in the leadership level is kind of cool to have that representation.
Hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. I feel like that's super rare as like a skill set to have. So, how does that impact? I think like the design direction and like the strategic kind of thinking that y'all are doing.
Um, in really good ways because I think she's always asking good questions about how things work and how like patients would really like go through the flow, would they actually think this like, or what questions would come up there, and like she's like been through it herself in terms of doing the research hands on. So I think she brings a lot of both hands on tactical knowledge, but also from a strategic level, being able to actually embody the voice of the customer and then make sure like you're thinking through all the options too.
Hmm. Gotcha. Oh, that's amazing. It makes me jealous. I want to work in an org like that. And it's so you're wearing both the user research and the design, the full on designer hat. How do you kind of balance those worlds? And I've always struggled with that because it's like, how do I find time to do deep discovery and user research while pushing the product experience forward?
Yeah, it's hard. Like, I mean, this was the first time we had user researchers as a separate function. And sadly, we had to let some go, but because of layoffs. But it was really nice because I felt like it was a really great partnership to be able to have someone who's like, they're just really doing research, really diving deep in discovery. And I felt like my limitations are, I was like, I want to do all that, but I can only do it in like small chunks because I still have to design and implement and move things forward. Um, and so what that means is just kind of our scope has gone from like, okay, let's like look at 2 years, a year from now to like really, okay, let's look at the next couple of quarters and just we're really realistic now. Just okay, here's what we can manage. Here's what I can fit in terms of discovery, user testing, and design time and everything else. And we'll have to like ship and iterate and work quickly from there. So it feels much more startup-y now versus before. It's like, oh, we have actually all these resources. That's a bigger org. It's like, no, not anymore.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's always that tension. I really struggle with that because it's like you want to make the time for the research and you're like, this is so impactful, but it's you gotta get the work done. As so on your pod, you've got product designer, yourself, and then a handful of engineers. How do you all like to collaborate? Like, what does your process look like?
Yeah, I've always worked best with very close partnerships with my PM, and it starts from everything from like getting involved in early strategy conversations when we're trying to evaluate all the different use cases out there of this product we're trying to build because we're making trying to make it a platform versus just like a single use case. Um, and then getting in there to helping him craft the story, like how do we talk to our stakeholders, and then also in discovery too, where I like to we're both in there doing like those user research calls with the subject matter experts, and then we go relay it to the engineering team because I always find it super helpful when engineers are super interested in the user research. Um, and then all the way down to like when we're actually building things, that's where like getting all that collaborating closely with engineering in terms of like how do we actually what does handoff look like? It's never truly a handoff. It's actually always we're just in there together implementing like at the same time. Um, I don't know. That's like a long way to say that. It's a very we're it doesn't feel like it's like a linear process. We're all just kind of in there building things together and tinkering and improving as we go.
Hmm. Amazing. I love the fluidity of that and kind of like your best ideas kind of coming out of the collaboration is always my favorite part of that process. Sometimes with PMs, especially if I'm a product designer, I'm like really collaborating with them. It's hard to draw boundaries between like, okay, we're both doing strategic thinking or we're both doing discovery, but now I'm solutioning as a designer versus and they're coming with prototypes. Do you all have like kind of distinct responsibilities that you try to divvy up, or is it truly like, we're going to tackle this together in the best way we can?
I think where the line is drawn is that like after the strategic brainstorming level, like he's out there, our PM, he's like really then getting stakeholder alignment. Okay, so now we've decided our story as a team. Like, I'm gonna go shop this out, go talk to leadership, go do all these things. And then I'm there, okay, trying to visualize what does this actually look and feel like. So I'm in Figma, I'm developing those concepts and those mocks and everything else. And then we kind of come back together to kind of like to reunite the storyline. And so I think that's been a really like, healthy relationship. So it's like I also always love when PMs do know how to use Figma, but you don't necessarily need to. But like I think he leaves that to me. Like, okay, all the designing and visualizing solutioning, like I have ideas in my brain, but you know how to do it. So I'm gonna leave that to you. And then we can come back together. And he's like really good at actually like thinking through like the very technical feasibility aspects and how do you actually communicate that to leaders.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've stepped on some toes before, so I'm always curious how other teams collaborate on that. Thinking about the engineers a little bit more, like what are your must dos for like good developer collaboration? Do you have like a checklist you like to follow, or any specific tactics?
Yeah. No, I wish I had a checklist, no specific checklist, but I think getting them involved early and often has done me better than in the past where it's like they come in at the end with a questioning a lot of the requirements, which means I just haven't gotten them on board early enough, or my PM and I. And so I think it's always worked best when from the very beginning they're bought into like the problem we're trying to solve, who we're solving it for, what are their user needs and their pain points, how do we go about doing this. Because I really kind of respect their perspective they're coming from, and I think a lot of engineers I've worked with have really great UX sensibilities, and so that's helped me kind of they like challenge the way like I've designed things, which is always super helpful to be like, okay, let's figure out alternative solutions, like how we thought about this versus like that type of flow. Um, and so I think that has been really nice to feel like it's like not just like I'm designing your developing, but it's like, okay, we're actually kind of in each other's worlds more, and like what I do, what they do affects me, what I do affects them, and so why not collaborate in that fashion? So like it's been a good partnership in that sense.
Amazing. Sometimes with developers, I feel like there can be like a culture of don't touch the bear. Like their time is super valuable, and we don't want to disturb them. They're doing all this important work. Have you run into that at all as well? And like, how have you kind of managed that and kind of brought that collaboration to the forefront?
Yeah, there are definitely times where it feels like they are like drinking from the fire hose, the engineering team, and so they're so heads down and like, don't add meetings to my calendar. I need to do like work without meetings. So we definitely respect that, and I get where they're coming from. And so I really adapted the way that we collaborate versus like having for it to be like synchronous and live over like a meeting versus like, okay, are there ways that I can get feedback on things and ideas through like, recorded videos, Loom, whatever else, through like really quick Slack checks. And I feel like that's their preferred method, I've learned. And so I've just like adapted the way I communicate based on like how they work best. And it just depends on the team. Not all teams are like that, but mine particularly likes to be async.
Gotcha. Are you all in person or are you distributed?
We're all remote.
Gotcha. So do you find that async sort of collaboration style helps with the distributed nature as well?
It does. I'll say there are times where meeting live, you just answer so many more questions faster. And so
Mhm.
I always appreciate those, and it's just trying to find that balance where I was like, okay, yeah, everyone's remote, but then it's like playing a game of telephone sometimes, where it's like, okay, it's getting kind of mistranslated down the line, so we all need to come together to actually reach alignment again. So it's a mix.
Gotcha. Very cool. If you This is kind of a fun one. If you had like a magic wand and could change how folks collaborate with design as a discipline, do you have anything you would want to change?
Oh, interesting. Honestly, it would be cool if everyone could spend a day doing the in the other person's role. Like it would be really interesting to see how like engineers like lead user research and just see what questions they would ask, what they would learn or like get in Figma. And then I would be terrible at coding, but it would be really interesting for me to like just shadow what they do. Like how do they figure out like our backend infrastructure, all that stuff. Like how are they crafting their prompts for the LLMs to extract data and things like that. Or on the PM side, like what's just being a fly on the wall, figuring out like what being in on those conversations with the exec leaders to figure out, okay, this is what they care about. Here's how they're delivering the messages. Here's where we're not meeting the mark, et cetera, et cetera. I think that would just be a really good empathy building exercise for folks to just really appreciate what the other role does.
I love that. I've heard people like shadowing customers or like doing like everyone's got to do a day as a customer support rep. But I love the idea of like doing that internally with your team and like we're going to watch the engineers for a day and see what's happening. Like that feels amazing. Um, I thinking Going back a little bit to what you were saying at the beginning, AI is the hot topic, I think, for everyone these days. How is that shaping your world as a designer and impacting your work?
I feel like I am using AI every day. From little things in terms of like just helping me like summarize meeting notes and things like that to like with my own personal workflow to generating ideas for designs after I've done some brainstorming. And then tinkering around and prototyping to quickly just like come up with something interactive that I can put out there in front of users, in front of our engineering team to quickly tell, like, get feedback. Like, oh, nope, that's not going to happen. It's not feasible. Or from the user side, like saying, like, I actually would think about it doing it differently. This is how my workflow actually is, and that's just kind of allowed me to just speed up my process. And then to actually building the tools and incorporating AI into the actual product, like we're kind of doing that for the first time for on like the clinical side. So it's been sort of this thread within everything that I do lately. And yeah, I think what's missing, which we're trying to find now, it's like, okay, vibe coding's out there. I'm making all these fancy prototypes. How do you actually translate that into like a real world setting where there's a lot of constraints on actually the development side? And there's still kind of this little gap there that we're trying to figure out how to cross.
Amazing. Yeah, we feel that gap as well. And so if y'all figure it out, let us know. But it's great for prototypes. I think it's been really helpful for getting like a sense of like the feel of an interaction where, you're not using the full design system, but you want somebody to like just interact with the flow or like a pattern that you're experimenting with. And have you all like done any experiments around like we're gonna like use an MCP server with Figma or like try and get our design system into the AI a little bit closer, or is it really just like low fidelity?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Like I've been trying to play around with getting design system in there and like to like mild success or so. So it's like it's very much so where like I still feel like I'm tinkering on the side as like a designer. Like we and I know like the engineers are using AI for like coding help, things like that, but like we haven't really like seamlessly integrated our two processes yet. Time will tell. We'll see. But people are excited for it, so who knows what will happen.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot. It feels like every day there's something something new on Twitter where I'm like, or on Blue Sky or something where it's like, what's going on? Like I feel like I'm out of the loop now. Do you feel like it's a fire hose as well? And like, how do you find yourself like keeping up with the latest in AI?
Oh God, there's just so much, right? I think it's a matter of like, yeah, I follow a lot of different designers on through Medium and just like read get their newsletters, things like that, and just kind of
Mhm.
tinker around with things, like playing with all the various tools because you get all those announcements like every single day. And just like trying to like play around with it for a bit and then figure out, okay, how would this actually be useful in my own day-to-day work? Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Um, and yeah, I think there's a lot more, like always a lot more to learn. Like I feel like for me, like I think I want to actually get into like actually understanding the more technical side of things. Like how do you then do like things like incorporate like work with cursor versus just kind of basic like UI prototyping tool.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and I also love learning. So like I feel like I'm always like signing up for various Maven courses. Like okay, all right, let's sign up for this. Let's learn this new skill set, and just collecting different skills here and there.
Amazing. Maven's the best. Yeah, I'm always looking at their their courses and what's going on. Do you I think part of like vibe coding and like AI prototyping has made that skill set so much more accessible, but at the same time, so it's hard for me to know because like I have a coding background. And so how do you, as someone who has maybe less of a coding background, feel about these AI tools? Do they feel easy to use, or are you kind of like, I wish I understood a little bit more about what's happening?
They feel easy to use, and I wish I understood more about what's happening because it definitely feels like, yeah, you click a button and magically you make this whole like app prototype, right? But as soon as you make it a little more complex, like things break, right? And becomes like super buggy. And I don't only have that coding knowledge to like to debug it. So I think that's where it's like, okay, that's where the magic then sort of like dissipates. Like, okay, now I have this like beautiful prototype and it's interactive and everything else. But then it's like it's to actually make this like workable and shippable. It's like it's going to require way more work. Yeah, so I think that's where it's like okay, like, coming in with getting more technical knowledge, or at least partnering with someone who has that knowledge is kind of how we will actually then be able to like make something usable out of this.
Yeah, it's we've definitely like felt that tension as well, and it's like that first draft, and you're like, wow, this is almost there, and then it's that last 20% that always takes the most work. Have you worked with AI in like the user research process at all? I've talked to some designers who are using tools like Dovetail to like do some research and like collect automated user research. Has that become part of your process or less?
A little more on like the a bit on like the synthesizing some of the themes and everything else, but I definitely as someone like who actually really enjoys user research and I feel like it's like I learn a lot from doing that. I don't try to do too much outsourcing to AI. Like one, because like I'm still at the point like I don't know like where are you pulling all of these like quotes and insights from? And like I think there's so much to learn like when you do that work yourself to actually like talk to the users, figure out like do the note taking and then gather the themes and of course use AI to kind of help you synthesize. But there's a lot of little I'm still noticing now like when I use Copilot or things like that, there's a lot of nuances they miss. Um, it misses from like actually like looking at the interviews, which I catch, and the things from like the UX and usability and just like intonation. And I feel like maybe I'll get good enough to be there to get there, but at the end of the day, we're still designing for humans, and so I feel like if I'm not involved in that process, I'm gonna miss a lot, and that will then result in like our products missing a lot when we don't actually really understand the humans we're designing for.
Yeah, absolutely. I've also been reluctant to let research go for that very reason. It's like if I can't hear directly from the people, I can't truly understand the problem, and it's hard for me to scaffold that mental model. So I'm right there with you. You were touching on it there with like hallucinations and like AI isn't always as accurate because it is non-deterministic. How do you cope and like manage those issues when they arise?
Yeah, in our so in the product we're building, they take a very our entire org is taking a very conservative line around using AI and especially generative AI. They're like, because we're in the business of healthcare with HIPAA and all these regulatory compliance things that we need to abide by, they are just like, we want at least for this first go, no generative AI, like abstract, even like things like abstracted summaries. Like we want to make sure it's coming from real data, and everything you do that has like AI on it, you've got to slap a label on it and just tell them exactly where you're finding it, where it's coming from. So that stance has been interesting because it's provide a lot of constraints when it comes to like we have kind of an AI chatbot thing like it's become really constrained in terms of like what it can do, and then also on the clinical side like okay making really painfully obvious like we're using AI but it's extracted from real data we promise, and like here's the proof of all that, and you just have to kind of design around this kind of human almost mistrust of AI still, and that's been really interesting for me to figure out okay we know we need AI. People are like, we want this, but also, do we want this? Do we trust it? And so we don't. We're trying to juggle, like straddle that line right now.
Yeah, it's a tough. I think we're seeing this everywhere. Like, I work with way less stakes. I'm not in healthcare. It's a lot of my stuff is e-commerce, and so when we've done some AI implementations where we can basically we built an agent that will go and do like research on new inventory that's coming in for the system, and so instead of somebody have to manually sit there and like populate the form for the whatever they're selling, the AI agent will go and do it. And so you could give it a little information and then it goes and gets all the rest of it. But we've had issues where it'll hallucinate like the description or it'll add product features that don't exist and things like that. And it's hard to because people go to autopilot very quickly. And it's like that user is not kind of fine tooth combing the results there and making sure that everything is as it should be. They're like, oh, it worked the first couple of times, so now I trust that it's working. And very quickly, mistakes start emerging in the system. So we've tried really hard to design like, hey, you are responsible for the output and like showing those kind of messages, but people just go to that autopilot so quickly. Is have you all seen that as well, or is that something you're actively designing to prevent?
Right now, I think we're on the opposite spectrum. Like people don't trust it, so they're like, okay,
Yeah.
I can see it on there, but I need to go verify. So, like, for example, like what we're trying to do is to really help automate and condense a lot of these workflows. So it just a lot of the things we're trying to finding patient data is so manual. Like you're opening up the patient record, you're opening up insurance portals, you're opening up like all these spreadsheets. And so that's their current workflow, right? And it takes them a lot of time to find this info. So what we're trying to do is like, we'll grab all that information for you, present it on a single screen so you can actually make a decision right then and there. And super easy. They see that and they're still like, okay, all right, I see that you have it here, but I'm still going to go check. I'm still going to open up all the portals because they want to make sure it's actually coming from a real place. It's actually a part of the patient data itself. And I think that like that safety or like that security is essential in healthcare. And so I feel like it'll be interesting to see after they get used to the product to figure out, okay, do I trust this enough to be okay? I see it on here. I don't have to go open 10 other portals. I can actually click submit and then be good to go. We're gonna it's kind of the testing phase. I'm really interested to see how people react to that or whether they're always going to be like, I don't trust it. I need to make sure it's still there and all the other things they check. I don't
Mhm.
know.
Yeah. Well, kudos to them for checking because we're seeing the exact opposite, and it's problematic because you want people to check. I think that human in loop is really important. But people very quickly it was like, oh, the first week we're going to really check this, and then very quickly it was like, nope, we're just going to trust it. So curious to hear how that evolves. Um, with your engineers, it sounds like they're both building AI products, but also using AI in their workflows a little bit more. Have you noticed that changing how you all collaborate? Like, are you are they bringing more prototypes when you all are having conversations, or how has that changed things?
Yeah, it hasn't changed too much, honestly. I don't think they're doing the prototyping, and I think it's right now during like the development phase to like help them debug things, to help them implement stuff. And so it'll be interesting as when we move on to this next use case and this kind of a newer project to figure out now we're all incorporating AI here and there in our workflows, and that will be interesting when we'll be like, okay, we all have competing prototypes. Let's figure out which one will work best. I look forward to that. So we're not there yet, but it'll be interesting when we get there.
Yeah, that's such a cool idea of like everybody has their own prototype, and it's the engineering perspective, design, and product, and put them all together. You probably have something pretty awesome. That's exciting. Kind of thinking more about like maybe some bigger kind of product questions. Um, how do y'all approach like experimentation and iteration, especially in healthcare, because it's such a kind of lockdown field? Do you find yourself able to do that, or is it very much like we got to ship this release and that's kind of it for us?
It really depends on the team. Like I thankfully am on a team where we're building this product from the ground up, so 0 to 1. So we really have a lot of room to actually um, experiment with things. Like when I build prototypes, it could look completely different than what we actually develop, which is cool. On other teams, it's very constrained down to like we need a test copy, and they're just changing like minutia, and so like that it's very different. On our team, I feel like because we're making this thing for the first time ever, there's room to experiment within reason. I think at the end of the day, though, it's like the appetite among the rest of the company. It's just like we have to prove value. We have to make sure, like at the end of the day, whatever we're doing is going to show that we're impacting revenue, showing that we're decreasing administrative burden, showing all these things, and we'll give you budget for this, but we have to make sure that you're meeting these kind of like these KPIs there. And so it's interesting to just kind of hear that as a culture within Providence in general compared to other places I worked at.
hmm I was going to say, like, that doesn't feel like the norm. It feels sometimes it's like pulling teeth trying to get a KPI or a goal out of the org. Does that change? How much does that change in your like design process? Where are you like, we've got this goal here and I'm designing for that, or and then like there's the user angle as well. Like, how does that shift things?
I think the biggest one, like that right now, there's been way more emphasis on bringing in revenue. I think before I joined, it was really like let's make it's still a big like KPI, like making like clinical workers, providers' lives easier and better, like bringing joy back to practice of medicine. I think that's great. But like really now, because the entire company and healthcare in general is feeling a huge crunch financially because everything happening with all the federal cuts, everyone's like, there's like a microscope on everything that we do. So it's now it's like, okay, how do we prove that what we're doing it actually like reduces costs, brings in more money, and all of that. So we're seeing things in that lens, which is helpful in a way because as a product designer, we have to balance user needs with the business needs. It's really like it helps us narrow our scope to like figure out, okay, here's what we have to prove for our MVP, and then we're going to iterate on that and do like the next version. We'll do this and do everything else. What the on the other hand, kind of feel like the con of all of that, it's like things like really like nice to have like beautiful UX and UI and everything else, then it gets put in the backlog. And for me, that hurts. So it's the reality of things where it's like, okay, you have to prioritize and like figure out what brings value right away, and then build in the nice to haves and the usability stuff as we keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's always good for a business to focus on revenue because you need that for everything, right? At the same time, sometimes when I've been in those environments, I feel like it's very easy to get stuck at like a local maxima where everything is so iterative and like your ambitions get smaller and smaller because you're so tied to the goal. How do you sort of maintain like a culture of innovation and willing to try new things that might not immediately like tie back to revenue, but ultimately could be like a main driver for y'all?
Yeah, I think what's been really nice about being part of Dig is that so far a lot of the initial ideas are coming from the bottom up. These are from like coming from the actual key users, the subject matter experts who've been like, hey, we have a huge problem in our workflow, like we are like way overburdened, like can you guys help us? um, and that has been nice because a lot of different projects have like come out of that, which come from a real user need, that then you can tie in, okay, here how it can how here's how it can relate to the rest of the business and then to health systems beyond Providence. So we've been nice that we've been sort of sheltered in this kind of independent incubator to actually think about all these different ideas. Not all of them work. Like there's been a lot that haven't been green lighted. Um, I think just recently now it's like you also have the tension coming from the top down. It's like make sure it makes money, but also make sure it answers user needs. And so it's a unique place that we're in right now. It's like where we're hearing it loud and clear from leadership and from the rest of the company to like make sure everything we do makes money, but at the same time we have to make sure we're actually solving a problem for our end users there. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's like I think our team in general has been really good at balancing the bottoms up and tops down approach.
Yeah, that's perfect. Sometimes I find, especially when I have a PM that I can collaborate, they're wearing that like revenue hat a little bit more, and then I'll wear the user hat, and we don't butt heads, but we we have productive conversations together. Is that kind of similar? How do y'all work, or do you find you both kind of go back and forth there?
That's a good question. I think that I think for sure I like. I mean, he's definitely very user oriented as well, but he's definitely since he's in sitting in a lot of those meetings with stakeholders more, he's definitely like more nervous about all the financial stuff. So that's always top of mind. So I think like similarly, we are we are good at terms of like wearing those hats and be like, okay, he knows way more about what's happening on like the higher larger company scale than I do. And then we can bring that conversation together, be like, okay, we understand the user's needs, but like, how do we actually like package this up into a bow and make sure that we're actually answering what leaders want from us and know all that stuff too. So it's been good that way because he brings in a lot more like industry knowledge or just about Providence specific knowledge that I don't have.
Mhm. Gotcha. Yeah, that sounds like a good relationship. It sounds like the perfect balance between product and design. And I loved what you were saying earlier about like being in a place where ideas can bubble up from the user, but you still kind of have that forcing function of checking against the company goals because a lot of times it's one piece of the puzzle there is missing. With that lens, like what's been your favorite thing you've designed recently?
Oh, as part of work? Oh
Hmm.
man. Well, at work, so I mean, this is kind of like it's a very B2B enterprise tool for sure. And so I think like usually when you think about enterprise B2B, like it's like, oh, there's like, there's not that much creativity, right? It's a lot of dashboards and things like that. But it's been interesting for me to actually then like, have sort of the design leeway, like to totally abandon our design system and do something completely new. So that's been fun, just tinkering around, and that's where I've been playing with AI tools too, just kind of reimagine, just like let's completely like do away with our current systems and do something completely different. And of course, we have to bring it back to reality, but at least I'm given the space to actually imagine what it could be. So that's been fun. And then outside of work, I do like just random little projects on the side just to test out the tools. And my favorite one recently is like I was using Google Gemini to like create an entire like storybook for my 2 year old because he's really into Sesame Street right now and Miss Rachel. So trying to develop a whole story for him to like wean off his pacifier. And so I've been just playing around with that. So that's been fun, just a little creative outlet for me to do something completely different than what I do at work.
That's amazing. I love that. I think it's funny with my 6-year-old, we just recently vibe coded our first app that idea that she had. And it was amazing, like using, the AI tool to just kind of go from she wanted to make a game that she basically like saw like an ad for and was like, I want to recreate this because we were going to let her go on the app store and get it. And she did it. She was able to like tell it what she wanted and come up with something. So I think that's been really fun to kind of see like what tools we can build with them.
That's so cool. And for her, that's probably so empowering that she can build a whole game all by herself. I mean, with your help, of course.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
I had to get in there and prompt a little bit, but it was good. It was good. She definitely had the idea, so it was fun to bring it to life. Um, is there a kind of reflecting on your career journey as you've kind of gone through everything, do you have any advice that you would give to like first time product designers who are just getting started today in this AI world?
Yeah, I mean, I think the advice still applies no matter where when you're coming into the industry. But when I came to transition over to design from like a marketing and business development background, I found the most useful thing was just talking to lots of different people to discover like what is it that they work on, what is design, because there's so many flavors of it. Um, and I think that's still useful right now. I feel like the design community in general is very welcoming and very open, and so I would advise anyone trying to break into the industry that go out there and just talk to people, like learn about what they do and don't like about their jobs. Like, are there, and how would it apply to your own background? I feel like there's been a lot of various, I would like not necessarily mentors, but partners in my entire community and career who've actually just like helped lead me to other things along the way. And then you never know when someone else will pop up into your future from your past. So I think that's been really cool to see when I reflect back on my journey. So yeah, just and pay it forward when you can and help someone out who's kind of trying to break in when everyone did at some point. So that's my best advice.
I love that. That's phenomenal advice. I think everyone could stand to pay it forward a little bit more. And yeah, especially for juniors. Like I think back to those early connections I made and like the friends you make along the way. And it's like that really you didn't realize it at the time, but those are gonna be lifelong friendships. So definitely lean into that. As we're wrapping up here, is there something that everybody should go check out, either something you're working on or the best thing you've seen online recently?
Ooh, oh, good question. I mean, I've been talking about like the Maven and newsletter stuff. So there was one designer who has really practical advice who I follow, and took his class on Maven is Shinrin Ma. And he has really good like AI for design newsletter and a really great course on Maven. And just I feel like he talks about his tactics and everything. It's just very easy to follow. And that would be one person I would recommend for folks to look at if they're looking to learn about how to incorporate AI into design. Yeah, can't think of anything else. Yeah.
Right on. Well, Sylvia, thank you so much for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure, and we'll hope we have you again sometime.